Yarra. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Adrian Lahoud. Adrian has been until recently running the M.Arch Urban Design Programme in the Bartlett School of Architecture, but I think I can announce that he's just recently been given a new job and is about to become the new head of the Architecture School at the Royal College of Art. So congratulations to him on that. Adrian has also been researching into many fields around the issues of ethics, etc., including working in Palestine, which I think he'll be referring to amongst other issues.
Thanks very much, Jane, for the invitation. I want to quickly go through a case study, actually, to try to explain the way architectural knowledge can be deployed within cases of human rights violations, particularly a collaboration between the M.Arch Urban Design Program here at the Bartlett and Amnesty International and Forensic Architecture at Goldsmiths. Since I believe architecture has a profound role to play in two different directions. In the direction of architectural knowledge deployed within spaces of conflict and environmental violation as a kind of advocacy, and also through the development of structures which lend social transformation some durability, what we might call design. So in July 2014, the Israeli government launched Operation Protective Edge against Hamas in Gaza. On August 1, a planned temporary ceasefire is broken. The IDF claims one of its soldiers has been taken prisoner, and it launches something called the Hannibal Directive, which is a doctrine which authorizes overwhelming firepower to deny the prisoner, to deny the opponent a life prisoner at any cost. By the 2nd of August, the widespread loss of life and destruction resulted, or there was a widespread loss of life and destruction in the town of Rafah. So the task of our investigation is to try to attempt to reconstruct events in these 2 days in order to ascertain whether either side was guilty of war crimes violations. And the reconstruction proceeds from video footage, satellite imagery, existing imagery of the urban context, interviews, social media, damage reports, and assessments. But how do we act on something we can't touch or experience? So this is the first 2 weeks of the students arriving to a new program in London. No one out of the 65 students and staff has ever been to Gaza. The only person who'd actually been to Gaza in the entire investigation team is Saleh Hijazi from Amnesty. So we have this kind of extraordinary situation. The very place we need to investigate will not allow any of us to enter. In fact, it will also not allow many people to exit. So this means if we can't travel to Gaza in some way, we have to reconstruct a kind of virtual Gaza here in London. So how do you construct a virtual space that's a reliable double of a real space? And the first thing that we realize is you have to understand the city in terms of what I call the emission of signs. So cities are continually shedding signs, and you have to somehow learn how to read these different signs. The signs, which are really just small fragments of information, have to be painstakingly stitched back together again to reconstruct the events that they refer to. So if you have time to sift through this kind of residue, you can start to join the fragments together and tell a story about what happened in the city. So obviously this is quite a powerful ability, and there's a kind of contest, let's say, between parties that want to make that kind of information freely available and parties that want to limit that kind of information becoming freely available. So to put that another way, rather than divide the Earth into east or west or into north or south, we could divide the Earth into areas of high resolution or low resolution. So areas of low resolution would be things like the bottoms of the ocean, but also places where governments collaborate with satellite companies to limit the kind of resolution of publicly available information. Or take something like metadata, which is really just information about information, say something like the GPS coordinates or the timestamps that are stored on a digital image but not visible. It's valuable because when you have a lot of it, you can start to extract patterns in the kinds of images that were taken. And you can do it without actually looking at the images themselves. So when the former director of the NSA and the CIA, Michael Hayden, says, we kill people based on metadata, which is this famous quote in relationship to the drone campaign, Amazon make enormous fortunes extracting patterns from metadata, then perhaps it's not so very elite to imagine that we could try to work out ways of protecting people based on metadata. And the kind of complexity of these situations is a great cover for violence. The relationships between cause and effect in these kind of 2 days of this conflict are very complicated, and the crimes and their consequences are entangled. And so there's a kind of opacity which we need to kind of figure out ways of seeing through. But we're definitely not the NSA. We have no money. Most of the software and information that we're using is freely available. And so even though we're in a position of total technical inferiority, we have this skill set and this knowledge as architects and urban designers in examining things that happen to be very complex. So in order to sort this massive information, each element has to be located in time and space. And when no metadata is available, time is established through temporal markers, things like shadows being cast by a column. Spatial information depends on cross-referencing distinctive features in the landscape between different images. And the process of tagging and organizing these fragments becomes extremely laborious. It's a very, very time-consuming project. But at a certain point, there's a kind of threshold that's crossed. A kind of critical mass is reached, and a series of serial linkages between the different fragments start to intersect with one another, and the figure of an event starts to emerge, albeit one that's completely riddled with blind spots. So organizing this massive information becomes problematic. In response and in coordination with the United Nations investigation, the FA team begins to develop a piece of software called the Gaza platform to try to sort and organize these tagged fragments. And the software is really just designed to locate correlations across different search fields throughout this information, or this massive information. So the software, and I'm going to get a little bit technical about the software because I think it's kind of important, basically automates a set of codified rules which constrain and stabilize the information in such a way as to align it with and conform it to specific legal norms. So in this case, those fields that are deemed relevant to a humanitarian investigation on alleged war crimes. And that epistemic threshold between what can and can't be calculated is crucial because it defines the sensorium of this machine, of this platform that we're producing. And so that in itself is also a very important side of political struggle insofar as the fields, the filters, their sorting procedures being directed towards this end, formalizing in some way the intentions of the authors and allow them to be mechanically reactivated at different points during an investigation. Any judgment then regarding the rules of proportionality and its alleged violation will depend in part on the ability of the platform to help establish and verify what counts as a proportional and disproportional pattern of activity. The patterning of information produced by the code and the algorithms generates what we could call a symptomatology of events. The task of the investigation then is to reconstruct these symptoms into durable pieces of evidence that can then be submitted to forums like the International Criminal Court. In order to make legal judgments, this symptomatology needs to be brought together with an etiology, the study of causes, since responsibility and intention will have to be proven in the case of any violation for criminal proceedings to move forward. And the patterning of events alone is rarely enough to establish a cause, though it can give a fairly reliable indication of and suggest directions, let's say, where further investigation can proceed. And this relationship between the forum of judgment, in this case the ICC, and the kinds of statements that it can make is conditioned by this technical system. And I think that's really, for me, what's so fascinating about this project. Together they form what Felix Guattari would call a collective object of enunciation. By formalizing and codifying relationships between each piece of information, it creates a durable infrastructure between inquiry, an archive, a set of technical protocols, and a legal forum that conditions, constrains, and activates certain kinds of judgments. So the early results of this investigation, in which we played a very modest part at the very beginning of the investigation, are already being published. it's likely that we'll proceed into an international criminal court investigation. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks very much, Adrian. Moving on now to our fifth speaker.